Hey folks, I'm Papa Boris, and this is the third game to finish from Stage 3 of the 2025 Through the Ages World Championship. Maybe not the World Championship, but my games in the World Championship. And I thought this game was really instructive. In the previous game, which was against Matil and Alexander, I got Genghis Khan, I got the heavy cavalry, and Matil and Alexander worked together. They moved swiftly to gain a bunch of strength themselves, shut me down, and I was basically put in a position where I had to get lucky to win. In this game, what we're going to see is what happens if someone gets Genghis Khan with heavy cavalry, and the two opponents are not on the same page about the need to shut that down, no exceptions. Let's go ahead and begin. I was the first player here. I took Acropolis. I have talked before about Ashoka. Not a bad leader by any means, but a little finicky, and I just don't like dealing with the restrictions of playing with this leader, so I took Acropolis, which is a perfectly fine wonder, and I passed the turn. I would still do that again. Matil decided to take Hammurabi, so he just wanted a leader that gave him an extra action, totally fine. I think taking Roman roads, which is a very strong wonder, is also totally fine, can't go wrong there. And then Gandhi decided to take the Roman roads and Ashoka. I think it would have been fine to take Roman roads and just a rich land or an urban growth. That's completely acceptable as well. Just, the wonder and a rock. You could take Sun Tzu and an extra rock. That's fine. You could take Confucius if you like. I don't think you can go wrong here. I don't think this is a mistake by any means. I just personally prefer not to play with this leader if I have a reasonable alternative, and certainly with more leaders coming out, there were other alternatives, so you didn't have to take Ashoka here if you didn't want to. Now, on my turn, something pretty significant happens. Confucius, which is what I would have liked to take, unfortunately lands just shy of the one action spot. So for my leader, I take Sun Tzu. I don't think it's worth it to avoid Sun Tzu and take Confucius for the extra action. So I take him, I play him. This isn't a leader that I've seen very much in my games, I don't think, so we'll just do a quick recap here. You get an extra strength, you draw 2 extra cards at the end of your turn, which is a lot of cards, and your tactic is private to you. Once Sun Tzu leaves play, the tactic does become public, and it also gets +1. So you kind of keep the +1 strength permanently as long as you're using the tactic that you had when Sun Tzu left the game. But on the flip side, your opponents can copy it from you as well. Kind of an interesting leader. One thing to consider if you're choosing between Sun Tzu and another leader is what age 1 leaders benefit from drawing more cards. There are a lot. It would actually be remarkable if you played a game that didn't have a majority of its leaders caring about drawing cards. Jan Shishka and Genghis Khan want to find tactics, so Sun Tzu helps with that. Christopher Columbus wants to find colonies, Sun Tzu helps with that. Eleanor of Aquitaine and Nostradamus gain effects that are contingent on them playing events, so finding events to play with Sun Tzu and then being able to drop them and keep the events is worth it for those leaders. Pretty much only Gutenberg and Saladin don't care about drawing military cards beforehand, so definitely plenty of synergy options with Sun Tzu in this game. Then for my last 2 actions, I of course built a mine, and the question is, do I take something here for a little bit of extra juicy, or do I just, pay my civil action debt and raise a worker? I've been trying not to just blindly pay my civil action debts. I think I've been over-prioritizing civil action debt payment in my early stages of this tournament. And here I do decide to grab the frugality. My thinking is that I'm the first player. I have no idea what's coming out. There might not be anything good to take. So let's spend the action now while I can get a food with it, so I don't need to spend the action on my second turn when I've got the second turn doldrums to do something that might be just kind of stupid. All right, Matil is up. And having grabbed Hammurabi, Matil plays Hammurabi, puts the Stonehenge Wonder under construction, totally fine, and then takes Engineering Genius, which I was happy to see. I don't think it's a mistake by any means, but I'm glad that one of my opponents paid 2 actions for it, and the other opponent doesn't get to take it for 1 action. It's worth noting, you can avoid Engineering Genius here. You could build a mine, raise population, and take urban growth, and then you're getting 1 rock for 1 action instead of 2 rocks for 2 actions. It's the same ratio, but you're ahead on your civil action debt. But one of your opponents gets Engineering Genius A for 1 action. It's probably what I would do, just because I'm so biased against doing 1v1 hate drafting in a multiplayer game. But I don't think anything is wrong with Matil's option. I mean, heck, this is, one of the great things about Hammurabi is you can make plays like this without really too much negative consequence to yourself, and no other leader would have been able to do that. So Gandhi, I'm sure, was sad Engineering Genius wasn't going to mosey its way on down to him. He plays Ashoka, he makes a mine, he raises population, and for his last action, he grabs the urban growth. All very normal. The only thing is that because of what Ashoka does, you feel bad about playing this urban growth, so then you become tempted on your second turn to do weird things. Something to consider is that instead of taking urban growth and raising population, the second card in the Age 1 deck was Iron, and you could just take it. It is a really good card, obviously, but Gandhi chose not to do this, which means that Iron goes down to me, and that's quite a fortunate start to the game. I play an event risking a temple, so I'm just like, I'm going for it. I will accept that every once in a blue moon I don't get a temple, and that's just my life. But I'm lucky here. I get civil life, so there's not much I can do with it other than raise population, but that's fine. I save an action with that. I take Iron. I play my lab. Now I got 2 actions to work with. It's, the development of civil life can sometimes be annoying to deal with, because on the second turn especially, if you get that development of civil life super early, you end up having an extra action on a turn where you wouldn't have had much to do with all your actions anyways. But luckily, in this case, it's not too bad. I can raise population with frugality, go into consumption, but hey, I got frugality, so it makes up for some of that. And then I do have this rich land A I can take, which will help me build an iron mine in a couple of turns. Now, there was another way of doing it. Instead of raising population and taking this admittedly kind of crappy AJ card, you could grab Monarchy. That's completely fine. With Acropolis, Monarchy is quite good. Monarchy will only cost 6 science, and if we do get a free temple later, it'll only cost 5 science, so maybe I should have taken the Monarchy, but I figured, hey, there's another Monarchy in the deck, and I don't want to do a Revolt into Monarchy because that defies the Acropolis. The Acropolis does not give you the science discount for Revolts, so it's a little bit anti-synergistic, so let's just play a normal turn. All these actions are reasonable, and I do kind of get a payoff for saving an action, basically, actually, I guess it's the opposite of saving, for using an action last turn to take the frugality A instead of paying my civil action debt and raising population last turn. I keep this because Genghis Khan is in the game, and then we go over to Matil. So Matil builds a stage of Stonehenge. He builds another stage of Stonehenge. He does not use Engineering Genius A because he wants to get out of corruption. He then spends 2 actions for knights, and he's got 1 action left and grabs the Monarchy. Now, as you might guess, if you've watched my other commentary, I'm not a big fan of this turn. I'm not saying it's a mistake, but I don't like this turn for a few reasons. And, if I'm wrong, well, at least me talking about it and you explaining why it's wrong should hopefully be instructive to somebody. So why don't I like this turn? Well, number 1, Knights is the card I would take third of the cards in the 2 action spot. I think Alchemy and Swordsman are both better than Knights, especially with Genghis Khan here. If this wheels, you're going to really want those Swordsmen. And Alchemy is obviously just a great card. In fact, you may even be able to build a lab straight in some cases and save yourself an action, though I wouldn't do that here. Here I would have, for my 5 actions, taken Alchemy, researched it, played it, or upgraded my lab to an Alchemist. That's 3 actions. And then, did he raise population here? No, he hasn't raised population here. He would then have 2 actions left over. You can either take Knights if you really want it, or take Swordsman, or raise population and grab some reserves. You are playing with Hammurabi. Oh, there's Monarchy. You took Monarchy, right. So it's take Alchemy, research it, upgrade it. That's 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's 4 actions, begging your pardon. And for the 5th action, yeah, just take Monarchy. Monarchy is really good with Hammurabi because you can do the revolution. Or in this case, when you have Stonehenge, you can just research it and then be really great. You have 3 military actions, 5 civil actions, temporarily 6 with Hammurabi. It's just great. You're living a dream. But he really likes these knights, so he takes the knights here. I will say, if you're going to take the knights, instead of building 2 stages of the wonder, build a lab. When you're thinking about whether to rush your wonder or build a lab, I think it's important to judge what kind of wonder you have, because some of them benefit from being rushed and other ones don't. And Stonehenge is not really a wonder that benefits from being rushed, because the 6 signs that you get for building it, you get it no matter when you build it. So you might as well get the lab, which is not retroactive, get an extra science, and then collect the 6 flat signs from Stonehenge later. As we're going to see, Matil gives up not only 1, but 2 science for not building the lab right now, and I don't think he gets anything out of it just by having Stonehenge completed sooner. Any case, he finishes the turn. It's over to Gandhi. Gandhi plays an event. It's 2 free science, which is really good for me because it means I can upgrade iron a turn sooner. He grabs cartography, he grabs alchemy, he starts the Roman roads, and that's his turn. Now, this may seem a little odd. Why not build a second lab? Is Boris going to criticize him for that? Well, no, because Roman roads is a wonder that benefits from being rushed, because the sooner you build it, the sooner you start making your extra rock. So it's fair to say, well, let me rush this, focus on rocks first, and then get science later. Although, if you're Ashoka and you're already getting an extra rock right now, maybe you could argue it's better to build a lab. But then you have an extra action, and it's a turn where the extra action is maybe not so impressive, though, of course, I would have been happy to take Swordsman here, build a lab, take Swordsman, instead of building 2 stages of Roman roads. In any case, a very reasonable turn. This is how you kind of make the most out of Ashoka. He's also getting full Ashoka online with 3 different colors of cards. He's making an extra food and an extra rock, and he's about to be making an extra rock on top of that. So if he can get his civil actions fixed and, build a good wonder, then he's going to be in pretty good shape, and Ashoka will have really paid off. So on my turn, look, I know I have a problem. All right, I know I have a problem, but Swordsman and Genghis Khan are right here. Yeah, I'm not gonna not do that if you're gonna drop it right in my lap. So with apologies for me taking Genghis Khan yet again, hopefully there is some instructive value from this particular game to compensate for the fact that this is like my bajillionth time doing it in this stage. I begin the turn by offering open borders to Gandhi, and he accepts. I think it's correct of me to offer it. I think it's correct of him to accept it. Yes, obviously with the Genghis Khan Swordsman thing here and Sun Tzu for drawing lots of extra cards. As Gandhi, you might definitely be suspicious that the open borders are going to matter. But on the other hand, I got to pull 2 workers out of here before I get heavy cavalry online. So it's also fine to say, hey, I'm just going to take the extra military action and then cancel the pact once Genghis Khan goes online. And also, just a quick note for the newer players among us here, the reason why I'm offering it to Gandhi instead of Matil is that Matil benefits from an extra military action unduly, since he needs the military action with Hammurabi to get the extra civil action. And so an extra military action would be doubling his card draws, as opposed to with Gandhi, where it's only adding 1, and that's, a 50% bonus. In any case, I take the Swordsman, and obviously I'm going to take Genghis Khan. I don't switch yet, because I don't have my tactic online yet. I research iron, I upgrade a mine, and then I throw down the medieval army, and I don't know if that's really correct or not, but my thinking is I gotta throw cards away, so I'm willing to spend an action in order to get this tactic down in case I want to use it later, in case something goes wrong, and this ends up being the tactic I need to play with, then that's just something that I'm glad to have down and not have thrown away. Also, I'm drawing 4 frickin' military cards here, even after spending an action, so I think spending 1 of them to do this is okay, but you could debate that that's really worth it or not. I chuck away the rebellion. I keep the kidnap just in case I'm able to get some aggression. I draw kind of a dud hand here. These tactics I'm never going to use because I'm obviously using heavy cavalry. And then a defense card, which, okay, granted, the 4th card I drew, thank you, Sun Tzu, it potentially could be useful, but these tactics are all going straight in the trash. The one good thing about it is I know that my opponents are not going to get these tactics to fight with me, so there's a legion, a phalanx, and a medieval army that are all not going to be available to my opponents. So now there's only 1 of each of these left in the deck. Okay, Matil is up. Researches monarchy, thanks to this Stonehenge science, though it is worth noting that if he had built a lab instead of these 2 stages, he got 3 science here. He would have had 1 from the lab, so he would have been 2 science short of researching the monarchy, and he could have done it now and still researched it. So, he just threw away a science, but I don't think he actually got anything for rushing the Stonehenge. He now finishes Stonehenge, gets all his remaining science, get the culture and the smiley face online, he raises population, and he takes engineering genius. I do want to pause here for a second. I'm not a huge fan of this, because it is speculative. 2 wonders are already falling off the row, and I checked. There was no way for him to take engineering genius, finish Stonehenge, and put a wonder under construction without being corrupt, that I could find in any case. And what that leaves for wonders is Great Wall, Silk Road, and Machu Picchu. And the Silk Road does not benefit from engineering genius because it has only 2 rock stages. So it's just the Great Wall and Machu Picchu, and we all know how I feel about Machu Picchu. So really, you're taking that engineering genius for Great Wall, or a very distant wonder in Age 2. And I disagree with that. I think if you have Monarchy with Hammurabi, you have 6 actions. Your opponents have 4 actions. You have 6. Take the reserves, just play another action later and get 2 rocks or 2 food that are not contingent on you having a wonder that you're building. He also grabs the cultural heritage, which is what I would have done as well. I just would have taken reserves over the engineering genius. But with 6 actions, I think having an action to get 2 science, especially because you've now thrown away 2 science for not building this lab last turn, because you didn't do it again this turn. Getting the 2 science back with this seems like a good plan, but I'm just being snarky. So now the turn ends. It's back over to Gandhi. He finishes the Roman roads. Now he's making a truly ridiculous 5 rocks, although it's a little tricky for him to use these rocks. He builds a lab with urban growth, and he takes the reserves. I would tweak this turn a little bit. So what I would do is I would research alchemy and then upgrade alchemy with the urban growth. So that way the other worker is still here, and then you can build the other alchemy straight. The problem with that is that when you do that, you are losing a little bit of value with Ashoka, because that costs 2 actions, 1 to research alchemy and then 1 to upgrade, versus the 1 action of just building a lab. So it saves actions in the long run, but it does cost an extra action this turn, which means that you're not taking the reserves, which means that Ashoka is getting shut off. So I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's not worth shutting off Ashoka in exchange for saving a civil action overall. It's basically like you're paying an action to get an extra food and rock, which is, I guess, a decent trade for an action. But I'm just kind of squidgy about not using actions efficiently if I only have 4 actions and don't have an immediate plan for getting unstuck from that. But with Gandhi's turn, he does make full use of Ashoka, and I think that's a reasonable decision to make as well. I just think it's worth pointing out. You could save an action at the expense of Ashoka's value if you upgrade a lab now, and then you fully build a lab in the future. But all right, Gandhi goes for maximum rocks, maximum food, and it's back over to me. So I upgrade another iron mine. I didn't feel comfortable playing irrigation because I have no smiley faces, and that means that since no one else played events, I didn't have a chance to get a rock to get this other upgrade to happen. With these 2 rocks I have sitting around, there's not much to do. After I raise population, I just build the first stage of the Acropolis, and there's still not a whole lot to do. I'm not jazzed about any of these options in the 1 action spot. What I decide to go for is drama. You could go for printing press instead. You could go for urban growth. I think both of those are very reasonable. In fact, later on, if I remember correctly, I do get the other copy of alchemy in this game, and then I kind of wish I probably would have taken the urban growth here instead of drama. But I thought, you know what the friggin' heck, man? We got Bach and we got Marlene. We, have the ultimate game for drama, so might as well take it and give myself that opportunity. Though I do wonder if I do this a little bit too much, the leader-based speculative drama/printing press grabs and maybe taking urban growth would have just been the smarter option. I chuck away all those tactics and the immigration. I'm pretty sure it's never going to happen. I draw a whole bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, no playable events, though I do get another defense card, which is nice, and it goes back over to Matil. So Matil plays an event, and we have development of religion, so we do get a free temple. He then gets his signs from the cultural heritage, researches knights, makes a knight, and he grabs Saladin. He decides to go for Saladin right now, and then he takes the urban growth, and where his last action raises population. Now, it could have been worth considering taking frugality instead of raising the population, because then he could have made, he just would have gotten 2 food. Now he's going to have to wait 2 turns to get his next worker, whereas if he, let's say, had kept that food. Oh, never mind. What am I talking about? If he doesn't raise his population, he's corrupt. Okay, forget all that. Yes, obviously he had to raise his population to get out of corruption. End of story. Okay, so that's his turn. Notice how Matil is very meticulous about his opponent having Genghis Khan. Because he did this in the other games too, and he's going to do it again. He sees Genghis Khan with the swords, like, oh boy, there's that asshole Boristina doing that again. And he's ready to rock and rumble. He's going to get the knights, and he's going to copy my heavy cavalry. So you can see it in advance. He's paying attention to what's happening on my turn. He's planning for it. In this particular case, there's no need to rush. He decides to get the extra civil action with Saladin, and then he passes the turn. Now, Gandhi, on the other hand, is not that concerned about it. He raises population. He grabs the monarchy. He makes a warrior and puts down the other copy of Fighting Band. Now he's got 2 actions left, and he raises population and plays reserves. I'm not a fan of this. I would have rather researched alchemy and upgraded a lab and gotten science going, because that would be pretty significant. In the short term, he does have enough science next turn to research monarchy, but why not get your science going while you can? I think it's okay to lose the food from Ashoka. Yes, it means you don't get to make another worker next time, but I think that's just not that big of a deal. And I don't think that making a worker and playing reserves, basically paying your civil action debts, is worth it compared to researching alchemy and upgrading a lab, which is also paying your civil action debt because you're still planning on doing that at some point, only that payment of your civil action debt is also giving you an extra science. So he throws away some cards, draws one more, it's over to me, and now I take the patriotism, so I'm getting ready to build my army. Can't quite do it yet, so I finish building the Acropolis. I again am one rock short of being able to upgrade because I didn't have any events to play, and the event that we got from one of my opponent playing events over the last cycle was a free temple rather than a rock. So I'm kind of in the doldrums here for stuff to do. What I decide is to research swordsman and take irrigation. I did need to research the swordsman in order to get this irrigation because my hand was full. And I do build another warrior for 2 rocks. Now I didn't have to do that. I could have upgraded a warrior, and then I would have saved myself a military action. And it would have still been the same amount of strength. So maybe that would have actually been smarter than building a warrior. But in any case, I know for sure that next turn I'm going to have 3 food, and I'm going to get a worker, and I'm going to get a swordsman, and I'm going to use this heavy cavalry. So I abandon the medieval army, put this down, and we're ready to go. I throw away all my tactics. I think I even threw away a defense card, and I kept 2 different aggressions, the kidnap and the plunder. Probably should have just thrown the kidnap away and kept the extra defense card, but I drew another defense card and another useless tactic in a vast territory, and we're over to Matil. All right, we get this, which would have helped me get my last iron mine up and running. Alas, it was not to be. Matil chooses 2 food. He then raises population, builds his second lab, a few turns too late in my opinion. He grabs irrigation to fix his farms later, grabs iron as well. He's got 6 civil actions, so why not? And then he makes a knight. All right, he's ready. He sees what's about to happen with Genghis Khan, and he just keeps on going with it. Now, in this case, you might wonder, why did I not switch to Genghis Khan? That's a good question, actually. Why didn't I switch to Genghis Khan? I could have gotten 3 culture, even though I don't have my tactic online. Thanks to the Acropolis, I would have had 1, 2, 3 strength, which would have been enough to get 3 points. I would have given up 2 card draws. But is 3 culture worth 2 card draws? I guess that's fine. I guess retroactively I am fine with choosing to spend 3 culture to get 2 draws, but I don't think I actually noticed that. No matter how many times I reviewed I've looked over this full game twice in preparation for this video. I still miss these little things like, why didn't I switch over to Genghis Khan? I don't know why I didn't. Okay, so Matil builds the niceties. He is that Genghis Khan is about to drop harder than a truckload of bricks, and he is preparing for it. Now, we go over to Gandhi, and we have a very instructive turn here over in Gandhi Town. Gandhi researches alchemy, upgrades both labs, and for his last action, raises population. Now, I get the raising of the population, right? It gets him out of corruption. He paid 3 blue tokens to get that population. If he had just built a warrior, he would not have gotten out of corruption. But Gandhi leaves Nostradamus behind, which would have given him 3 strength for avoiding being the weakest player, which would have prevented some aggressions, perhaps, by Genghis Khan in the future, and also, maybe saved him the pain of some events. He also does not take swordsman, which would have given him the opportunity to raise his strength by 2 by upgrading the warriors, or 3, or 4, if he ends up building more. He doesn't do this. So this is, I think, one of the illustrative things about this game, is in the previous games, or the previous game at the very least, both my opponents worked overtime, double time, if not triple time, to deal with the fact that one of the players was Genghis Khan. And it was effective that they did so, because I was in really, really tough straits in those games after my culture was shut off, and after they exceeded me on strength, and as H2 was ending, and I was dependent on Genghis Khan for a tactics card that I could no longer play coming up very soon. But in this, and it was easy to look at that and say, oh, well, they were lucky. They had knights and they had phalanx. And, if they hadn't had that, then they would have been. Yeah, well, in this case, Gandhi had opportunities to deal with Mr. Khan coming up. And maybe even could have built Genghis, the Great Wall, though that would have been a little tough to do with his limited actions. He had Nostradamus available here. He had Swordsman available here. Yes, he would have had to be corrupt. or like, slow down his lab upgrades in exchange for researching swordsmen first. But he chose not to do any of these things. So then he passes the turn. In the short run, it looks like, okay, 4-5-3, everything's fine. But if you're looking at what your opponents are doing, trouble is definitely brewing here. It's public information here, what I'm going to do. I also research irrigation and upgrade a farm. That's not random. The reason for that is that upgrading one farm after I make a worker here, I will go down to 2 food. The age will end. These 2 tokens will disappear. My next worker will cost 4 food, and 2 plus 2 is exactly 4. So this is that concept of immediacy, of choosing when to upgrade your economy based on what you're going to need very soon. So that farm is not just, I'm just doing it randomly because I need to upgrade my farms. There's a very deliberate reason why I'm upgrading one of my farms. Now, I do need to put down Genghis Khan, and I need to play patriotism, raise my population, and make a swordsman, so that now my heavy cavalry is online, and I even have 2 rocks left over to upgrade both my other warriors, which is important so that I'm losing draws from age 1 instead of losing draws from this more significant cards that will be drawn in age 2. So all of a sudden, I went from 4 strength to 12, but it was public information that I could do that. There were no tricks up my sleeve. It was all out in the open. Note that I keep, in a sense, the extra strength from Sun Tzu because he's now attached to this heavy cavalry that I'll be using for quite a while. All right, I pass the turn. I keep my 2 aggressions. I draw a 4A, which is actually really lucky. This is a very strong card for me. And then it's over to Matil. So Matil plays an event. We all get 3 military cards, which is actually kind of unlucky for me. It makes it more likely that my opponents get defense cards. He then disbands a warrior and builds a knight for 1 more strength. And it's very obvious now he's planning to copy my heavy cavalry and get 5 more strength. He then proceeds with a normal turn. He takes the breakthrough, takes urban growth, grabs bread and circuses to fix his happy faces later. He actually doesn't use all of his civil actions. He had 4 science. There wasn't a whole lot that he could have done. I guess he could have researched iron and upgraded 2 farm. Why didn't he research? God, I'm learning something new every day. Why didn't he research irrigation? He would have gone from 4 to 1, and then 1 plus 2 is 3. I'm actually not sure. Maybe the alchemy, maybe he wanted to make sure that he had 4 science for alchemy and break through it. Well, he decided to do that, and he didn't spend all his actions, which is fine. He was out of hand space, and he switches over to 2 strength from Saladin. So now I actually could pull off an aggression, but it would kind of be a weird thing to try since we just all drew 3 military cards. The almost entire deck has been drawn through at this point, and we drew all but 2 of the cards in the deck. So it's very likely he has a defense card, and a defense card plus 2 is 4, so I'm not getting any aggressions through him. On the other hand, Gandhi, having passed the opportunity to do something about the strength situation, now finds himself without any great option. He cancels the open borders agreement, so that's good. That's something that I overlooked in one of the other games, and he pulled off an aggression against me because I forgot to cancel the agreement when he got up to a ton of strength. But now he doesn't have anything better to do to deal with Genghis Khan than to take theocracy, research it, and make 2 warriors, which really, really sucks, but it's kind of just like what he's got to do to not get totally aggressed here. And he's lucky that theocracy was even there because the better options that he could have used to avoid any problems had already passed him by. So he takes theocracy, researches it. He's got now 2 warriors to work with. Note that he could have researched monarchy. He had the science for it. So this is a concession to the fact that Genghis Khan all of a sudden has 12 strength. But monarchy, you might say, well, why not monarchy? Because the theocracy only has 1 extra strength compared to monarchy. They both give an extra military action. But if he does the monarchy, then he doesn't have the happy face, and this worker's unhappy. So he can only make 1 warrior. He needs the theocracy to make 2. He then takes Eleanor, plays her, which makes sense. Gutenberg does pretty much nothing. And he makes a worker into a warrior, and then he passes the turn. I don't know. This is one of those things, like if there was one moment in this game when I could ask one of my opponents one question, this would be the moment, because I think Gandhi just had a brain blip. I think he just accidentally clicked end turn and just forgot to do the warrior. Maybe he had a kid on his lap, or his cat was meowing in his face or something, and he just brain blipped. Because the turn doesn't make any sense. If you weren't going to use this for your second warrior, then there was no reason to do theocracy. Taking the theocracy is just ludicrous when you already have the monarchy in hand. and you're giving up a civil action for basically nothing if you're not using this extra warrior that Theocracy gave you to make, this worker that Theocracy gave you to make a warrior. The warrior gives 2 extra strength, going to 7, and it's really likely, with all these cards that were drawn, that he got 2 defense cards, and 2 defense cards plus 1 is 5, and at 7 strength he could have been able to block me. Maybe he was just hoping he would get an H2 defense card. Maybe he was trying to bluff me somehow. But the thing is, it's a weird bluff because even if he has 3 defense cards at 5, he actually can't block an aggression. So he's basically like just gambling on getting an H2. But, you know, I know that the odds of him getting a defense card in H2 are pretty small. So yeah, I would ask him like, hey, was that just a brain fart? But the turn ends, and I did keep an aggression to use. By the way, he was corrupt. The warrior would not have gotten him out of corruption. It was just for strength. Maybe that was the brain crossing wires. Like, oh, the warrior doesn't get me out of corruption. No point in doing it. And then he just blipped at the end. But in any case, I do a plunder now. And I steal 3 rocks, which is awesome. Those 3 rocks are not immediately consequential. I could be misremembering, but I don't think I go below 4 rocks, or I guess below 3 rocks, for a while. But when it does happen, it matters quite a bit, I think. So I raise my population here. I take alchemy. It's a little late, but it comes with breakthrough, so I feel like better late than never. You know, a good option now, better than the best option later. I don't know when scientific method is coming. Let's just make sure I have this option. And then I upgrade my other farm. Not my other mine, because I do have all these extra rocks, and I want to get 2 food instead of 1, because I'm going to need 4 food to get my next worker, so 2 plus 2 is 4. It's an important breakpoint, and that's what I think is the higher upgrade priority. This is one of those things that I've learned from watching Weidenbaum, is because previously, like even when I began this tournament, I would just sort of make upgrades at random, but now it's just shockingly simple. I'm like, why did I need someone to tell me this? Because it seems so obvious in retrospect. Your upgrades should be based on like what is most immediately useful in the future. I don't like need another rock right now, but I definitely do need that extra food in 2 turns, so that's what I should upgrade. I keep the 4A, so I can play it next turn, because it's a really good event, and Matil is up. Now, Matil is on the ball, so we get cultural influence from the event he plays. Nothing happens. He swipes my heavy cavalry, getting 5 strength, and actually going up ahead of me on strength with Saladin's 2 strength. So he is peachy keen. Now, there is still value from Genghis Khan because I'm getting 3 extra culture per turn. So I'm going to pull away from him here, where right now we are tied. In order for that not to happen, Matil would have needed Gandhi to also shape up and recognize the Mongol threat and beef up his strength. But Gandhi didn't do that in this case, the way that Alexandra did in the other game. So now Matil is fine personally, but he is kind of falling behind me on culture, and he also is behind me on economy. He's got the iron and the irrigation, but his science is low. And unlike me with the same low science, he hasn't already researched these production techs and gotten them going. So he is still in a little bit of trouble, though he does have an extra action of each type compared to me, so there is some compensation in his position. In any case, at this point, he researches iron with the breakthrough, he upgrades a mine, he researches irrigation as well, and then he grabs the reserves. And it's worth noting, I did notice that Matil seems to do this a fair bit. The researching of a technology without using it that turn, which has been criticized on my channel. I think in this case, it's fine. What else is there to do? Take theology? Well, you already have bread and circuses to fix your happy faces. There's nothing to build with urban growth. There's no workers. There's no wonder. I think it's fine to research this. If you know you're going to use it, you might as well just, plonk it down. There was nothing else really to do with his last action. So paying a civil action debt becomes the best thing to do. All right, so it's Gandhi's turn. He takes the strategy that appeared in the 3 action spot and just researches it. And I'm proud of myself. When I saw Matil's turn end and I was thinking about this game and I saw the strategy there, I was like, oh, that's what he's got to do. And yeah, that solves his problems. Now he's at 5 military actions and he can stop any aggressions against me with just basic cards. I was kind of hoping that that wouldn't happen, but Gandhi did catch a break. That strategy was pretty early in the deck. It was like, what, the 7th card to come out of H2 out of all these cards. So it's an expensive turn, but credit to him, he made the correct turn. Now he is going to make a worker into a warrior. I keep getting those 2 words confused for 2 more strength. Not so much for the military safety, but just to avoid corruption. And then he passes the turn. So I also catch a break because the 3rd card in the deck was Constitutional Monarchy, exactly the government that I'm hoping for. I play an event, it's Crusades. Mateel steals the culture from Gandhi, not me. Even with the help from Acropolis and Sun Tzu, Mateel is still getting ahead of me, so credit to him for that. I will research alchemy, I upgrade one lab, and I stop there. Much as I would like to upgrade my other lab and upgrade a mine, I think it's just too important to grab the organized religion and the constitutional monarchy. I think it's really lucky for me, honestly, that those cards are there in the one action spot, and I think to not take them would be kind of silly. This fixes my happy faces, and this fixes my actions. It'll take a little bit of time for me to get going with those, but it'll happen, and I need to grab them. I think it's worth missing a science and a rock to get both of those. I'm still collecting 3 culture from Genghis Khan. Mateel, also in his own way, catches a break. He grabs Nobel, which gives him science he desperately needs and makes the 2 strength from Saladin permanent, at the expense, of course, of the option of getting an extra civil action, but considering what's happening here, the extra strength seems like a thing you'd pretty permanently want to have. What to do with his remaining 3 actions? Well, he's got upgrades that need to happen. So he upgrades a farm, he upgrades a mine, and for his last action, he grabs Engineering Genius. You can probably guess I'm going to criticize this. I'm not a fan of this grab. I think I would prefer to take Frugality for 3 food. He is at that point where 3 food is kind of a big deal, and he can use it next turn. I think it's better than speculating on Engineering Genius, especially because he already has Engineering Genius from Age 1 and a reserves that can be used for rocks. There's no necessary reason to take another Engineering Genius when it's unclear when, or if at all, he's going to be able to use it. But that's just my personal preference. I know a lot of people like to take the Engineering Geniuses and go for the Wonders, which could be totally fine for all I know. So Gandhi's up. He plays an event. It's new deposits. We all get some rocks. And he's in a bit of a pickle here. Obviously, he'd like to take Robespierre and maybe like revolt into constitutional monarchy, but he kind of needs this happy face still from theocracy. So he's got a little bit of dependency issues. He decides to just take the selective breeding, research it, and take a very principled turn, upgrade both farms. He's going to let this go, which is risky, but there is still another copy of Republic in the deck, so maybe he can get out of Theocracy into Republic if he could, I don't know, use this organized religion or the team sports to fix his happy faces so he no longer has the dependency on Theocracy. In fact, just getting a worker out of here ends this dependency on Theocracy and then might allow him to take a government with more civil actions. But he's still behind me. Two crucial points of strength he's behind me. He would have needed 3 more strength to be able to shut off Genghis Khan. If he had taken that swordsman, then research swordsman, pip, 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 suddenly he'd be the leader. He'd be totally fine. But because he passed on it and did something else, which I'm sure was important too, but whatever that other thing he did was, is it more important than not being last? Was it more important than Genghis Khan not getting 3 culture per turn for like 5 or 6 rounds? I would say probably not. So it's a very instructive game here. When you see your opponent very clearly telegraphing what he's going to do with Genghis Khan, I think you got to take it seriously and make some sacrifices to your civilization to make sure that, even in a 3-player game where it's difficult to shut off Genghis, where you only need to be ahead of one opponent because of just how the numbers work out to get that 3 culture per turn, I do think that both opponents need to get on board with shutting that down. And the fact that Gandhi didn't was, I believe, the most significant, the most consequential strategic mistake of this game. At least that's how I'd analyze it, and who knows? I would love to hear other thoughts on that, whether I'm blowing that out of proportion or not. So on my turn, I get to rest easy because I'm still getting the 3 culture. I play an event. It's the Foray, I think, that I played, or maybe that was a while ago. And the inhabited territory pops up. I can't remember if I put this in or not. I don't think so, because I don't like to put in colonies without a bunch of defense cards. But I win it thanks to good luck, drawing the Age 2 defense card. I just get to play a swordsman and a card on my turn to win the colony, which is really lucky. If it had been on someone else's turn, I would have had to, cower in terror as another round of potentially devastating events goes by, but here I just get to casually build back the swordsman, and then now I got 2 extra yellow tokens, which is an amazing pickup. So here I use the Acropolis to build a 3rd lab. It's a really consequential feature of this wonder in this case, because it means I don't have to get my government to get another lab, and the fact that I'm building another urban building actually makes that government 1 science cheaper, so that's a really big deal. So I build a raw lab, I upgrade my other lab, I upgrade my final mine, and if I didn't have 2 yellow tokens here, I could still do what I did and just leave an unhappy worker behind, but since I don't even have an unhappy worker here, I decided to grab the breakthrough, because next turn I am going to have enough science for Constitutional Monarchy. Acropolis is decisive. This normally costs 12, and I'm going to have 11, but thanks to Acropolis, I get to research it for 8, and I get to have 3 science back, so I get a really cheap Conmon. I'm going to have my actions fixed. I got my big 3 online. I'm going to call them the big 3, even though I know irrigation is actually probably kind of bad, but I got the big 3 online. I got good culture, and I'm going to have my actions fixed, so I'm in really good shape. But a lot of that is because Gandhi didn't get ahead of me on strength. If he'd gotten ahead of me on strength, I'd only be making 2 culture per turn, which is the same as my opponents, and I would be probably behind, if not... I'm basically, the way it is I'm like just kind of keeping up. I guess they've played more events than I have and gotten more culture that way. Eleanor is actually getting secret culture from discarding stuff. But I would be probably definitely behind both opponents if it wasn't for Genghis at this point, having the 3 culture per turn. So Mattila's up. What's he going to do? Well, he plays an event as the strongest player. I don't bid for this because I do not want to be behind Gandhi on Gandhi's turn. And I also want to play an event, I think. I don't want to be behind on my turn. I don't actually remember if I had an event to play or not. I do, the crime wave. Yeah, so I want to make sure I am at least second when I play my event. So Matil does what I did. He wins a colony on his turn where he can rebuild immediately. This one's not as good. It's only 1 yellow token instead of 2. You don't get it for free, but you do get 3 science, which is pretty significant going from 6 to 9. So what's he going to do with his 5 actions? Well, he makes a very committal decision here. After raising his population and making back the knight that he spent to win the colony, of course, he puts Suez under construction. Now, I suspect that he already had a colony for this, because this would be a pretty crazy move to make if you don't already have the colony. The colony he ends up making is the autonomous territory, which gives an extra action of each type and another bonus at the cost of losing 2 blue tokens. So if you have that, I can see why you'd want to spend 7 actions to build the Suez Canal. And I'm not saying he was wrong to do this, but it is a lot of actions spent to make that canal, and there were other things that he could have done. He's got the science now. He could have taken the justice system. Now, he would have needed to play a card first to get the hand space to take justice system. He would have had to research bread and circuses or play one of these reserves to do it, but he could have taken it, gotten an extra civil action, and then he also, assuming he got 1 card out of the way first, could have taken another good card here, efficient upgrade for upgrading his last mine, or reserves or frugality. He also could have just spent 5 rocks and 2 actions, finishing upgrading his food and his mines. There's other stuff to do here, but he decides to undertake this project, which may also be reasonable, and then he makes a weird move. I don't know if this is a mistake. I do think it was a mistake, but I'm trying to be cautious about being too snarky in my analysis of these games. He uses Engineering Genius 1 to build the first stage of the canal. Well, this thing costs 4, which is what Engineering Genius 2 provides. And there is no other stage of this wonder that costs 4 rocks. So by using Engineering Genius 1 to build the first stage, he's losing a rock, because this is now only going to give him 3 rocks instead of 4. And I don't think it makes sense. We're at 28 cards. Age is not going to end before you can use the Engineering Genius 1. I think he just blipped and accidentally threw away a rock here, and then we pass the turn. All right, so Gandhi's up. Still on 4 actions, plays an event. It's the 4A, so Matil and I get the bonus, which is really strong. Gandhi misses out because he didn't take the swordsman. He's going to grab the organized religion, research it, upgrade a temple, and then take rich land. I do think that Gandhi messed up on this turn. Following, again, the principle of immediacy, he doesn't need these happy faces right now. Even if we're thinking about it from the standpoint of getting out of theocracy, he still doesn't need the happy faces because he has food. He could just turn this worker into an unhappy worker and get out of theocracy if he wishes. He doesn't need the happy faces, so spending 3/4 of his turn, 4 science and 4 rocks, all of which are a significant percentage of his resources, just to get these 2 happy faces going, is just not a priority. What is a priority, I think, is cavalrymen, because dude's gotta get out of this strength situation that he's in. In fact, just making a cavalryman and getting 3 flat strength fixes the problem. It's like, hey, there it is, problem fixed. Now, in this particular situation, we do have a medieval army, so he could switch to that even. That, of course, wouldn't help immediately because 2 fighting bands is the same as 1 medieval army. So from a tactic standpoint, the cavalrymen aren't amazing, and they do cost 2 actions, but I think that's just so important that, and he couldn't research them this turn, he only had 5 science this turn, but I still think it was just so important to get something going with the strength and shut down Genghis Khan that he had to prioritize that over happy faces that are not immediately helpful for him. Well, he passes the turn. I'm happy that he did this, because now I'm going to take these horses. I play my crime wave. It's scientific breakthrough. We all get some free science, which is awesome. So I get the constitutional monarchy going. I'm doing great on science. I fixed my actions. My economy's great. My culture's good compared to my opponents. I am loving life. Here we go. Let's take the cavalry. Let's research it. Let's make a couple of workers just barreling past unhappiness. And we're going to build this just for the 3 flat strength. So in the short term, I'm ahead of Mattil if there are any strength-based events here. I know I put in Crime Wave. I can at least win that. Or in that case, not lose the 3 culture for it. And I even have an extra action left over. And unfortunately, there's just 3 leaders here, and I don't want any of them. But I actually was pretty happy to grab the justice system. Now, again, I'm sorry if this is just like obvious and people think I'm a moron for commenting on this, but the thing is, old me would have felt weird about taking justice system here. There's really not much else you can do. I don't want any of these leaders. I mean, it's just like, my old me might have, like, for example, researched organized religion. Say, hey, let me pay my action debt. I need to do this anyway. We're about to need all these workers. This worker's unhappy, and this next one's also going to be unhappy, so this is a huge deal. It's just 4 science, 4 rocks to, boom, get 2 workers. I might have just done that and paid my civil action debt. And the reason I wouldn't have thought about taking justice system is that old me thought that justice system, when you already have your actions fixed from a good government, is sort of like a luxury, and that you generally shouldn't do it unless you've got like nothing else to do, or you're just like drowning in science for some weird reason. But from watching Weidenbaum, I realized that that's incorrect. It's interesting how often high-level opponents will prioritize taking this even when they have a constitutional monarchy, even when they have a republic sometimes. Just because in age 3, I mean, you need a lot of actions. Like, even when you have 8 actions or 9 actions sometimes, it still never feels like you have enough actions. So this is actually kind of a big deal. So I was happy to grab this. I also understood why I should be happy for it. I drew some cards. Economic progress could be really good for me. And Mattil is up. He plays an event, and it's Reign of Terror, which doesn't affect me and him, but it does mean that Gandhi is going to lose a population, and that hits hard. Gandhi's already in probably the toughest straits of anybody here, and he doesn't have a loose worker sitting around. He could have had one last turn if he'd taken cavalrymen and raised population like I suggested, but instead he's going to actually have to lose something, and there's nothing he can lose that doesn't hurt, and hurt real bad. So that is something I was very happy to see. As for Mattil's turn, he is going to get to work on the Suez Canal. He's going to put down the autonomous territory, lose 2 blue tokens, get an extra action of each type, and also get 4 science. So now he's got a lot of science here. I was a bit surprised by that. He does have low science production, but I mean, he had 17 science saved up. I would have definitely considered taking either of the other options, like the food to get an extra worker sooner, but science, I mean, we'll see. He uses it, so it's also perfectly reasonable. Now, what to do with the last 2 actions here? He decides to build another knight and take scientific method, which I think makes sense. This is a good way to fix his science production. He's got the rocks and the urban growth for it. And the extra knight, he didn't have to do that, but it is something that ties him on strength, so at least he can beat me on tiebreakers if it is his turn and he's the one playing the event. He's also got 1 action left, and he decides to research bread and circuses, and I think that is a mistake. He doesn't need this yet. His next worker is happy, so there's no immediacy to these bread and circuses. He also has a reasonable alternative thing to do, which is simply upgrade a mine. So as far as I'm concerned, when he researches this, he's throwing a rock away. I don't really understand why he would do this. With 18 cards, if you do the math, right, at least 2 cards go away, so 16, 14, 12. It means that Gandhi and I are going to need to take 12 cards past the automatic spot in order for the age to end and for these bread and circuses to be lost. You can do the exact math. I think that's literally impossible for us to take that many cards. So he wasn't in any danger of the age ending. I think he could have just upgraded a mine here, or even taken navigation if he wanted. Then Gandhi and I would have only needed to take 11 cards to end the age, which I still think is impossible. This, I do think, is a case where researching the technology at the end of your turn without using it is wrong. But he passes the turn. It's over to Gandhi. He has to lose something. He blows up a mine. It goes back to his population bank. Luckily for him, the coal is right there, so he can take it, research it, use rich land to upgrade a coal mine, so his rocks are kind of okay. And with his last action, he grabs a fish and upgrade. And I was really happy to see that because I again, think it was just kind of insane not to take the cavalrymen here. He's got to do something about this military situation, and just letting the cavalrymen float off in the breeze feels extremely risky to me. I don't think he needs this. Like, yes, that saves him 3 rocks and lets him upgrade the other coal mine, but he could upgrade the other coal mine without it. He's getting 6 rocks. He could do it if he wants to. He can survive on 4 for a while if needed. I think the cavalrymen, which is the last copy of that card, are just too important not to take. Well, he passes the turn, gets some more Eleanor culture for tossing cards away. It's over to me. I play an event. It's the economic progress. Cold War flips. I can't remember if I put that in or not. I think I may have or I may not have. Matil and I get 6 science apiece, which is a huge, huge deal. And I decide to build an opportunistic Louvre. So I take it and I build it. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe this is my first time going down below 3 rocks since I did that plunder against Gandhi. And so this is where it's significant. If not for that, I'm not exactly sure what I would have done. Maybe play Justice System. I mean, I am definitely playing Justice System. I play it this turn. Yeah, it's a pretty good move. So I definitely take the Justice System down, but maybe take Journalism for some culture. Maybe do this upgrade with the Organized Religion and the upgrade. Maybe research drama and build a drama. There are 2 leaders left, Napoleon and Bach, and I would love to have Bach. It'd be great to have with the dramas. So there's a few things I could have considered doing. Obviously take the cannon, which is what I do here with my last action. So I'm not sure what I would have done, but I felt like since I had the opportunity, getting 5 culture a turn plus the 6 latent rocks seems really good. This is something I didn't realize until I had opponents played against me. The 6 blue tokens from the Louvre are just so helpful because they raise your shadow army. You might not realize it while you're playing, but when you're playing against it, it's so annoying to always have to be like, oh, and if they wanted to, they also could spend those blue tokens to make another airplane. And it makes your calculations so much harder. So without any effort on your part, you're adding stress to your opponents as they try to figure out what they can and cannot get away with against you militarily. And again, 5 culture per turn and a Justice System to give me 3 blue tokens, making up for the 3 blue tokens that I lose to the Louvre. So it was a good opportunity, and I decided to grab it. Now Matil is up, plays an event. It's the national pride. I have the most culture thanks to Genghis Khan never being shut down all game. And for his turn, he's going to research scientific method, fix his science, both of them. He's getting good science production now. He grabs the cannon and the urban growth, and he upgrades a farm. And he leaves the rifleman there, and I do believe that was a mistake. I think that here, you got to kind of look at what's happening. I am really running away with it now. I had a lead thanks to Genghis Khan. I was making 5 culture per turn while my opponents are making only 2. So that's where most of these points came from. Without the Louvre, I'd still be at 47 culture. So I have a culture lead. Now that I'm making 7 actual culture, I'm still going to keep pushing that lead. I think his best hope here is to get me with the military. So grab the rifles, make it so that if you draw a Napoleonic army or something, you can use it. Make it so that if you get the positional army, which is this one, or the entrenchments, which is that one, you can use them. Make it so if you get an early tanks, you can do anything, and then just blast me out of the water. That felt to me like, given his science and his pretty good rock production, that was his best chance of catching up. So I was really happy to see that he's letting the riflemen go, because obviously one is here and one is here. There's only 2 copies in the deck, and now he's not going to get a copy of rifles. He's at the mercy of waiting for the deck to give him modern infantry if he wants to access, a majority of the tactics in Age 3. It's really just this card and that one. These are the only ones that work without infantry among the Age 3 tactics. So he passes the turn here. It's over to Gandhi. He plays an event to get the value from Eleanor. We get economic progress, so everyone makes a bunch of stuff, though Gandhi does make the least because he makes the least and he's also corrupt, though he makes the most food, so there's that. He grabs Bach and plays him, which might seem crazy when you're on 4 actions, but it actually isn't crazy at all in the slightest. It makes perfect sense because Eleanor gives 3 civil actions back when she's replaced. The age will be over before it's his next turn, so he needs to do this now. Otherwise, he's throwing away the actions from replacing her. So he replaces her with Bach. The one thing to consider is, well, maybe he should have taken Napoleon, because Napoleon would have given him 2 strength. But since he didn't take the cavalry earlier, he doesn't have any other things. It's just the riflemen that are sitting there that he can use. So Napoleon's only 2 strength in a military action. So Gandhi decided, hey, let's get the Bach. This will stop Boristina from doing Bach with drama, which I totally would have done, by the way. And even if he like made the age end, I have the science and the actions and the rocks to do Bach with opera. So he wasn't stopping me from turning Bach on just by having the age end and making my drama disappear. So stopping that, getting 2 culture per turn, he thought, hey, I am behind on strength, but is 2 strength going to make a difference? Maybe 4 later in the distant future, maybe not. So I think it's actually a correct play. I would have done the exact same thing. And now he raises population, builds a mine for 8 rocks, and with his last action takes the rifles, which is very smart. Now he can research rifles, and on the next turn, upgrade 2 of them for 4 flat strength, and try to, get out of trouble in case his opponents get up to any funny business. So at this point, it's not yet age 3, but we're going to do a little pause and stitch here. We're going to just take a look at kind of what is happening to everybody. We'll treat this next turn as the beginning of age 3, and then I'm going to pause the video here and stitch together the second part when I can come back and finish. So let's take a look at what's happening in the 3rd age. So I offer an international trade agreement to Gandhi so that he can make an extra rock and make an extra food. I went for this because I am on irrigation, so the extra food is really valuable for me, more so than the rocks. I can make up for rocks in a bunch of different ways by getting yellow cards. Food is a little bit harder to get from yellow cards, plus I have the rocks from the Louvre, and I have a bigger stockpile of rocks. And I figured Gandhi was the person who was losing this game, so that's just the simple reason why I offered it to him instead of to Matil. All right, now if we take a look at what's going on here as age 3 just about begins with 1 card left here in the deck, I have a pretty big culture lead. My science is pretty good, not as good as Matil's. He's got a ton saved up and he makes more, but it's pretty good just for what I have and how much I make. My rocks are pretty good for what I have. I actually do make the least of everybody, but it's 6. It's still pretty close, and I've got some extras from the Louvre, and I have the most action, so I can take yellow cards pretty freely to make up for the rocks that I don't have. I also have decent food saved up and food production, though not the most. Gandhi's definitely got the most for that, but he only has 4 actions, so it is difficult for him to actually use these actions to turn this food into workers. All in all, I thought I had this game in the bag at this point. I really thought, like, gosh, there's like just no way I lose this. I have such a big culture lead. I can keep pushing culture. I can be okay on military. And it turns out I ended up agonizing over this game quite a lot in age 3. So credit to my opponents, maybe one of them more than the other, for really pushing me and presenting me with difficult choices and situations that made this game a lot harder to win than I thought it was going to be, or possibly even to lose. So that's where we were. We'll pause here, and I'll be back in just a second. All right, let's see how things go in this 3rd age. I have a bit of a no-brainer to kick off the turn. There's only 1 leader left from age 2. The fact that there is 1 card left in age 2 is nice because it means that when I replace Genghis, I get my civil action back. Was Napoleon my first choice? No, that would have been Bach. But on the other hand, Napoleon does soften the transition. I lose 5 strength because I lose this heavy cavalry tactic, but I get 4 strength back from Napoleon, so my strength only goes down by 1 overall. Now, what to do with the rest of my turn? Well, I decide to make another opportunistic wonder grab. I take and make the Statue of Liberty. This gives me 2 culture because I have an H2 government and 3 yellow tokens, which I will promptly end up losing, but still the 3 tokens help with me being on irrigation to have enough workers for the rest of the game to do, armies and urban buildings and whatever else not with. For my final action, I decide to I get the medieval army, so I actually get another 2 strength back, and I don't have to lose any draws to do that. I decided to grab the urban growth. I could have also raised population to save a food, essentially, but I figured I had enough food. I had a worker. I could still make more workers by getting organized religion next turn. It felt like grabbing some rocks when I'm only at 6, which is, behind both opponents here. Seemed like a pretty good idea. Some other things to note here, I could have declared a war over technology against Gandhi, and with either a horse or a cannon, I would have gone up another 5 strength, and he would have been at 10. I ultimately decided not to do this, but I may have been wrong. if you look at Gandhi's situation here, he can research Rifleman and get 4 more strength, upgrading 2 warriors to rifles, and go up to 14. 21 versus 14, and 1 science, 1 difference shy of being able to steal this strategy, which would have been quite juicy. But I still would have stolen 7 science, or 5 if he managed to spend all of his science somehow. And yeah, that probably would have been worth it. I think I was afraid that he would resign if I did this, but that's probably wrong. I mean, it's still a close game. I don't think he would have resigned just because I was stealing 7 science from him. And even if he did resign, I would get 7 culture instead, which is a pretty good consolation prize. So probably it would have made sense not to go for this Statue of Liberty, save my rocks, because, you know, this completely bottoms out my rocks, and previously I had 12 rocks saved, and instead do the war, steal some science, and, you know, carry on from there. Right, I pass the turn. I throw away my Age 1 card because it was getting tossed anyway. I get a Freedom of Movement, which, as we'll see later, is a weirdly important card to have. We'll talk a little more later about why that is. And then the Third Age officially begins. I pass on this drama. Gandhi throws away a few cards. This monarchy that he took and sadly was never able to make because military pressure forced him into taking a theocracy. And now it's over to Matil. So you're Matil. And how are you going to deal with this Age 3 deficit that you're in? Well, he starts by playing an event, popping out this inhabited territory, which I did not put in, and winning it. So now he does have to pay 2 knights for it, but he also gets some more yellow tokens, which is useful for him, being on irrigation, just like it was for me. He then proceeds to upgrade his final mine, research cannon, make 2 cannons with exactly the rocks that he has. And does he have the mobile artillery? Does he have the mobile artillery? He has the mobile artillery. So he goes up to 22 strength. And I think he's making the right choices here. This is what you do. If you're behind on culture, the way that you win is you catch up on military. Now, he's really behind on culture already thanks to Genghis Khan and also me having built those 2 opportunistic wonders. So he grabs Opera to stem the bleeding a little bit on the culture front. He grabs Breakthrough for even more science. And he also takes the wave of nationalism. This is a little bit of a curious move, but if I do get ahead, he has 3 rocks to work with. I am a little bit unsure of this play simply because it's really unlikely he's going to ever fall behind Gandhi. Even if he does the whole, like, switch tactics trick, he still, like, would be at 12, right? So maybe he's counting on, okay, what if Gandhi goes up above 12, and then I switch tactics, and then I play this for 6 rocks? It's all a little bit finicky for my taste. I can see why he didn't take journalism, since he's already got Opera for culture, and he doesn't necessarily need the journalism, doesn't necessarily need the science. But maybe the revolutionary idea would have been a cool card to take, because even though he has a ton of science, as we're going to see, more science is good. And there is an Einstein and a Steve Jobs here, both of which work great with Nobel, because once Nobel leaves, we have these Nobel Prizes, and having a ton of science saved up is good so that you can consistently research 2 technologies per turn. Making 2 techs in 1 turn is a lot harder than you'd think, and so if you're able to do it every turn, and your opponents aren't, you're essentially getting an extra 4 culture from this guy after he's gone, which is truly a disgusting amount of value considering he was giving you some good stuff while he was alive. So I would have preferred the revolutionary idea there, but I don't hate this wave of nationalism either, and he passes the turn. Alright, so Gandhi's definitely feeling some military pressure. There was no war declared against him, but he's still in a tight spot, so what he decides to do is finish up his coal upgrades, get these rifles down, make 1 rifle upgrade. Obviously he's sweating some bullets here with this strength difference. He grabs the Opera because he has to with Bach. I mean, what else are you going to do if you don't do that? And then he passes the turn. Now again, I could declare a war over technology against him, and probably I should have. I was worried about, like, well, okay, what if he gets to take and research rockets, makes 2 workers, and then makes 2 rockets? That would be 10 strength, and then he could theoretically have the entrenchments, and that would give him 9 versus 2 fighting bands is a plus of 7, so 10 plus 7 is 17, and he would actually go up to 29. Now that's a little bit far-fetched, because of course he would need to flip up something that gives him 4 rocks. And that's tough. It's tough to find something that would do that. There is a wealthy territory that he could maybe win. There is the arms industry, but that would only give him 2 rocks, not 4. So it's really, really unlikely that he's actually going to be able to make 2 rockets on his turn. And for that reason, yeah, I probably should have just declared the war over territory, or the war over technology against him. The possibility of him, first of all, there being an arms industry here, there being a wealthy territory here, and him winning it, and it getting flipped, is minute, but I thought, well, I don't even want to have a tiny chance of being screwed. Let's just play in a different fashion. So what I decided to do instead of declaring war is I just chucked an event in there. We flipped up the crime wave, which I actually knew was going to happen. I was okay with losing 3 culture. I still got 2 culture back from playing the event now instead of passing on my politics phase. But my plan is to actually go for a peaceful approach. Nelson Mandela dropped into my lap here. If you haven't played or seen this leader, he's not one that shows up too much, but I think he's actually a crazy strong guy. So first of all, he gives you a civil action and 2 culture. That by itself is like good. That's really good. I mean, what game in age 3 do you not want to have an extra civil action and 2 culture per turn? There is a punishment if you don't have an unhappy worker, but as long as you have at least 1 unhappy worker, which I do, it's just an incredible leader right off the bat, extremely unconditional and just good in any circumstances. And then on top of that, any unused happy faces give you an extra culture. It's not added to your culture rating, which is, I think, I lost a game once because of that, but you do get extra culture at the end of your turn for every happy faces that don't matter. And one thing I've learned is that this does not need to be a bomb, all right? This does not need to be some like amazing amount of culture that you're getting from him in order for this to be a good leader. I mean, even if you're getting literally 0 for this, it's still a good leader to have this early in the age because that extra action and the 2 culture are going to add up to a lot. As it happens, I can actually turn this guy into an all-out bomb because I've got organized religion here. So I research it, upgrade it with urban growth for super cheap, and now I'm getting an extra 1 culture. But then the second organized religion I built is actually going to be worth 4 culture. 1 for the actual temple, and then another 3 for the extra happy faces. And that's just getting into stupid territory. So my strategy here was, let's not be on the aggressive. Let's just have enough military that I don't fall behind. And then, as long as Matil can never declare war on me, then I am just fine. I can just ride out the culture to the end. This may have been a little bit optimistic on my end. Maybe I should have kept Napoleon. As we're going to see, there does end up being a window for Matil to make a pretty strong push to win this game. In particular, on my turn, I didn't really pay attention to the civil service. I already had justice system, so I didn't care about it. I tuned this card out, and I really should have been thinking about the fact that this was going to land in Matil's lap, so to speak. He doesn't have a civil technology, and he definitely has tons of science. So I just kind of tra-la-la my way through the rest of my turn. I research the cannon, I make a cannon. I am planning to switch over to this mobile artillery that Matil has put down, and that's going to be my plan to kind of just defend myself. Right now, by the way, with my strength difference, I have the defense cards to pull it off. I gambled that Matil couldn't really declare war on me because he doesn't have any extra actions. There could be a military theory coming out. There are 2 copies in the deck. So he's got potentially 4 actions to work with if he spends 3 to declare war and then takes the military theory, gets those 3 back. He's got the 4 left over. But the wave of nationalism doesn't really work for him, so he's really only got 9 plus 3 is 12. I thought with 12 rocks, what he can do, like make another one of these armies, it wasn't going to be that huge of a war, and I thought that I would be all right. On the other hand, I still have to switch over to the tactic, so I only have 2 military actions to work with myself, so all I could do is get another, well, if you think about it, like if I switch and then make another army, that becomes 2 5s, which is 10. 10 more than 2 is 8, so I get 8 plus the 6 flat strength. That's 14, so I can go up to 29. He can go up to 32, because one of these armies is 10. And then plus the 5 from the military theory. Well, that's 37, so he is stealing some culture from me, but I thought, okay, if he steals that culture and spends his whole turn and all his rocks doing that, I think I could still be okay. And I mean, there's nothing else that I can really do about it now anyways, unless I'm like, spending my Louvre rocks or something. I thought, that's just the price of doing business, and I could still have enough strength to culture to catch up. On the other hand, I did have Napoleon here, who could have been giving me 6 more strength right now, so maybe I was being a bit greedy by grabbing Mandela here. In any case, I decided to grab the patriotism, which seems obvious because I need more military actions, not to mention the rocks. I also raise population and grab revolutionary idea. Now, the population raising does get me out of corruption, I believe, because for food, yes. So that was a needed move, and the revolutionary idea is good because I do need science. It might not look like it, but we have a lot of things we'd like to get now, wouldn't we? We would like to get 11 science, military theory, 12 science, airplanes, and then like anything else that I might want to grab. But I do think I needed to take the modern infantry because they're both here. All I was thinking is, Mathilde's getting one no matter what, so there's no point taking it. But there is a point taking it for me, because then with this I have access to all the age 3 tactics, and without it I have only access to 2 of them, these guys. So, because I don't have the Napoleonic army, which would have obviously been amazing with these swordsmen I had saved up, I just have this mobile artillery later that Mathilde has played. I probably should have let myself be open to having H3 tactics, even though it meant not taking revolutionary idea or being corrupt. Well, I pass my turn. I hold my breath to see if Mathilde declares war. I did draw 2 cards that are wars, so that reduces the chance that he drew a war with just his handful of draws that he got. And indeed, he does not have a war. So I heave a sigh of relief. He plays an event. We get a wealthy territory, and I decide to push hard for this because if I am going to go for the mobile artillery, then these swordsmen, well, they're just 2 flat strength each, and I figured that is totally worth it in exchange for like putting them back into my bank, then getting them out and building cannons and horses with instead. I do need to throw away 2 swords and my 2 defense cards, which was the maximum bid that I could have made, and it does mean that now I'm pretty vulnerable to further aggressions from Mathilde. And this is where I think Mathilde slips a little bit. So he takes the civil service, which just landed in the 2 action spot, and researches it. Now he has the actions to take and research 2 technologies every turn, and use Einstein to just make a bunch of culture simply from researching technologies. If you think about it, if you're Einstein and you research 2 technologies in a turn, that's 10 culture, because 3, 6, and then the Nobel Prize is 10. I am less likely to do 2 technologies per turn. I can for a couple of turns, but not consistently. I also have the actions for it, and I'm also not getting Einstein's points for it. So with Mathilde getting, let's say, 10 culture per turn, I'm at like 13 here. Okay, let's say that I build another temple, and then I'm at 17. He's at 12. So he's falling 5 behind every turn, but he also has the potential to get a military push against me. So falling 5 culture per turn, while you're, let's say, starting out, this is like 30 culture behind. He's not getting Einstein this turn, so okay, you're 30 culture behind, maybe more because, this turn I got up an additional 11 culture. But okay, I already took my culture, so fine, yeah. He's like, let's say 30 culture behind, falling behind 5 per turn. You need a pretty big war to catch up. But yes, I do think I'm in the lead. I do think I have the strongest potential to win, but there's definitely an opening here for Mathilde to come back. It's not impossible for him to get a big military, steal 20 culture from me, let's say, at some point, and then catch up this game in that way. So the civil service, once he played it, I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm sweating a little bit here. He actually has a window to do this thing. But I think he messes up with the fast food chains because, yes, the fast food chains are great. Yes, they'll be, what is this, like 10, 13, 17, make some more things in the neighborhood of 20 points. That is a big wonder. But I'm so delighted. I'm just thrilled to bits that he is going to be spending 16 rocks building a 20-point wonder instead of spending 16 rocks making, 2 airplanes and stealing 40 culture from me. So I do think this was strategically the wrong way to go, simply because in a situation like this, you're not going to catch up. Like, he could get the fast food chains for free and still be behind, and here he is spending, 3, 7 actions building it and another 16 rocks. That's just going to make it so much harder to catch up. It is one thing to, let's say, research opera and build an opera. That is 8 rocks, okay. 5 with urban growth. So 5 rocks for 3 culture per turn, stem the bleeding, that's fine. But I think this was too much. He also does not take the modern infantry here, and I think he should have taken it because that would expose him to more tactics. With this, he can now do the positional army and the entrenchments already. There's 2 of those. And if he gets tanks, which obviously are both still in the deck, he now has access to everything, and that just makes it a lot easier for him to, again, win the way that he's going to need to win this game, which is through a military push. So I think he made 2 mistakes here, taking the fast food chains, not taking modern infantry, and before the turn ends, he actually makes a 3rd. I think he needed to make another army. Now, he doesn't have any H3 cards. How does he not have any H3? Okay, sorry, I didn't realize he didn't have any H3 cards. Sorry, I miscommentated. He couldn't have declared a war over culture against me. He could have declared an H2 war against me, although, if I'm not mistaken, did I see? Yeah, I have a war over technology, so there were still 3 other cards. So he could have declared an H2 war if he had it. And then obviously, I think if he had it, he would have done it, because then he could have made this army and still declared the war. So I guess he must not have had it. So I did catch a little bit of a break with that, and perhaps all the more reason I shouldn't have been, throwing away Napoleon. But in any case, he could not have done a war over culture yet. If he builds 2 things, he only gets 2 draws instead of 3, so he makes it less likely to draw a war. But I think with the fact that he built the fast food chains, it's kind of clear he wasn't really thinking along warring lines. And I think he should have been. I think he should have just accepted drawing only 2 cards, hoping to get lucky, get a war, and push the military strength while he had the chance. Going up to a whopping 32 here would have been ridiculous with me having only the 11. Now, granted, I do get to catch up this turn, but not up to 32 levels. So with those 3 mistakes, I think that Mattil really undermined his chances of catching up, though there was a window for him to do it, opened up by me probably mistakenly. A, taking Mandela over Napoleon prematurely, and B, not taking modern infantry myself. So now both modern infantries are gone, and that means I and Mattil are both out of the running for ever getting most of the H3 tactics. So Gandhi plays an event and flips terrorism, which I'm guessing he's the one who put in, so he gets to blow up a building from both of his opponents. That obviously is very strong and extremely annoying. He blows up my temple, and he blows up one of Mattil's labs, which at least I was happy for that. He then gets opera down, makes a worker, plays an opera. I mean, he is behind on strength, but when you're behind, take risks. And yeah, I totally get what he's doing here. He's screwed kind of on actions, and in general, he's just hoping something crazy happens and he can just get some culture and maybe steal second place. For his last action, he grabs rockets, which is tough. I mean, it's a tough situation. Obviously, in this situation, you want 10 rocks for military buildup, but he's out of actions, and to take military buildup and the rockets would have meant that he delays the opera for a turn, and, he probably didn't want to delay 5 culture per turn any longer than he had to. Still, it's worth considering going for the military buildup instead. But he passes the turn, and it goes back over to me. So on my turn, I decide to take the pro sports and research it. This is maybe a problem that I have in my life, is that when I lose a building, which is not that likely, by lose a building, I mean the worker goes back to your pool rather than going back into your bank. So we're not talking like pestilence or reign of terror. We're talking like border conflict, the terrorism that just happened, or somebody successfully doing a raid against you. When you lose a worker like that, the worker goes from the building to your pool. I just have this thing where I really want to try to improve that worker, to make it hi, you helped me by blowing up my building. But honestly, it's obviously a psychological delusion. It doesn't matter how this worker got here. The important thing is what's the best thing this worker can do now. Whether it's the same thing it was or something new doesn't actually make any difference. But I decided to take the pro sports, research it, and then build back a pro sportsman. Now, these cost the same rocks as a temple, but I had to spend 3 extra action to get the technology down. I think it may actually be correct in this case, because this is worth 4 culture, just like the temple is, because it's 4 happy faces instead of 3 with Mandela, but also 4 strength, and I do think the strength is definitely relevant here. So I think it may have been the correct thing to do since it landed right here in the 2 action spot. I then make a population, or I raise my population, and with 2 workers and a patriotism, I can make myself a horse and a cannon, and then with 2 military actions, I switch over to the mobile artillery. So I'm at 29. Mattil could have been at 32, but instead of being 3 ahead, he's now 7 behind. And that's going to make it harder for him to then catch up to me and get ahead of me enough that he can actually declare a war against me. And so now I was feeling much happier than the previous turn, because I did screw up not taking modern infantry, but Mattil made a few mistakes on his turn. So now I felt I was pretty confident that with my food and my workers and these labs I could turn into workers if needed, I'd be able to just make enough mobile artilleries to hang on and never be in danger of losing culture to a war. Now, the drawback of doing this professional sports stuff is that I cannot now take the fundamentalism. And this is a really significant government, because it gives me 6 strength if I research it, and if I don't, it gives Mattil 6 strength. So that is a very big difference. If I did get it, I'm 6 ahead of him. If he gets it, he's 6 ahead of me. The difference between ahead of 6 and behind of 6, this is a 12 strength swing. 12. That is a huge amount of strength. And he's obviously got the science to get this. So it may have been worth it for me to not do the pro sports thing and get the fundamentalism instead. Obviously, the strength from the pro sports does make up for it. I could have done something different, but the thing is, where is my extra action going to come from? I've got 2 left over after making back my army. It's really hard to figure out where that's coming from. I would have needed to probably disband a sword instead of raising population. I would then be at 27 instead of 29. Then I could have taken fundamentalism, and I think maybe that would have been the right thing to do. As it is, I do get to take the patriotism and the engineering genius, but yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough letting this fundamentalism pass through to Mattil. So not without some misgivings, I pass the turn. I'm happy to see I get a 3rd war over culture. There's no way I'm going to use 3 wars this game, but with 3 out of the 7 war cards in my hand, it's less likely that my opponents will have wars, so it's more likely I can just ride the culture to the finish here. So on his turn, Mattil grabs Einstein and plays him, which is a no-brainer. And here, I think he continues to make some misplays. With 6 actions here, to me, and again, I'm not an expert, especially H3 is very complicated, so, take this with a grain of salt. I think what you gotta do is, spend 3 actions taking and playing fundamentalism, and then you need to research another technology in order to get the Nobel Prize. And that technology seems like it could be either opera and then make an opera to stem the bleeding some more, or take and play tanks. With 3 actions for fundamentalism, you've got 3 actions left to work with. So you could take and play tanks, or just play opera, build an opera. You can't do both. You can't play tanks and research opera and build it. But what you could do is something like play opera, build one. There's your 2 technologies, opera and fundamentalism, and you've got the tanks in hand, and that's, going to start your next turn's worth of technologies. Mattil, however, does this. He researches the opera, he makes an opera, okay, great, that's totally fine. And then he plays Wave of Nationalism for 3 rocks, also fine. Makes a knight, builds another cannon, gets another mobile artillery. He does the exact thing he should have done last turn, only he's doing it now. And then he could still take and play fundamentalism, so nothing wrong with this turn. It's a little different from what I was thinking, but I look at it and I'm like, okay, that's perfectly fine. But then he takes efficient upgrade, and tanks. I don't understand the efficient upgrades here. What are you going to efficiently upgrade? He has literally nothing to upgrade. He could, well, we're going to see. To his credit, he does find a way to use these. And what he does with these upgrades, I do believe will blow your mind. But it's basically like he could, from what we can see right now, build a lab and upgrade a lab. So he basically spends an extra action to make the lab, and in exchange he saves 4 rocks. He's got pretty good rocks. He doesn't need to do this. Maybe take 1 upgrade and research the tanks. But I do think that even that would be a mistake, because you really need to just take and research fundamentalism. Now the problem, of course, is that you already passed on modern infantry. If you take and research fundamentalism, you're also passing on the tanks. So you're kind of consigning yourself to saying, I'm going to win a war against Boristina with just mobile artilleries, which is the exact same tactic that he has. Not impossible. Not impossible with the 6 strength from fundamentalism and the 5 strength from military theory. And if you get your hands on airplanes early, it's hard for me to get all those technologies. I'm a little bit ahead on the workers, but actually not much. I only have 1 extra worker in my bank, so not even that much ahead. So yeah, I think that is workable. I do prefer my line of the fundamentalism, tanks, and then like not playing Wave of Nationalism this turn. But I think he had to, get these Nobel Prizes, and I think he needed to research an extra technology, and I think the 2 efficient upgrades were not worth the actions he gave up not researching stuff. So he is at 30. Gandhi's really sweating here. He researches the rockets, makes a worker, builds a rocket, and he upgrades a rifle. So it's looking like he's got some ideas. The wheels are in motion here to fix his military. In fact, he actually has the defensive army he's been holding on to. So now he's hanging on in there, all right? He's not in imminent danger of an aggression at the very least. He also grabs revolutionary idea, which makes sense because his science is downright pitiable, and then he passes the turn. So now the fundamentalism just barely stays on the board for my turn, and I'm able to take it myself. So there's the 12-point swing against Mattil. I do think it's worth it. With my science, it's going to be tough to get this and military theory and airplanes, but I mean, it's 6 strength, and it's kind of giving me a similar bonus as the military theory would have. I am losing my science production, but ho well. So now what to do with my final 6 actions? If I could research a technology here, I would get the Nobel Prize. So I could take movies, play a revolutionary idea, or research movies. But that seemed like a mistake because I'm not really going to be building movies anytime soon. And with these wars, I hatch a plan. I decide, you know what? If the fundamentalism was left for me, I'm going to go on the aggressive. So I make a worker. I make another pro sports for just 7 raw rocks. Then I grab the reserves for next time, and I play the revolutionary idea. So now I'm going to be at 14, which means I'm ready for military theory. And with the patriotism and the reserves, I go up to a crucial 14 rocks without having to spend my Louvre tokens. So now I am ready to declare a war and, let's say, build 2 airplanes, or I'm ready to declare a war and at the very least build another one of these armies. And basically, long story short, I'm definitely ready to declare a war. That was my plan. So I'm trying to follow the strategy of I'm going to push strength while I'm the cultural leader so that my opponents cannot push culture themselves. And that's a way of being more predictable. I can more easily control what my opponents are doing if I know that they're going to have to be spending resources getting strength. Well, Matil is up. He plays an event. It's international negotiations. He makes a very curious choice here. He gets to choose what Gandhi gives me, food, rocks, or science, and he chooses science, which I do find a little strange because I get that screws Gandhi, and that may be what he was thinking. Let me just screw Gandhi. Let me hit him where it hurts. But, who knows? He might still have a chance to beat me if he gets a big military lead and gets a tactic or something going. Now, he might not have had a tactic. He hasn't drawn that many H3 cards, so maybe he just gave up here, which is what I did in my 4-player game that I came in 3rd in. So maybe I'm a little bit biased by recency, but I just don't have a very good taste in my mouth from cozying up to the leader. I think there was a shot for him to go for it here still. But maybe the decisions he made on the previous turn made that too difficult to really pull off. And so it was the correct thing to do, just to hit the person that he is, trying to outrun and not get mauled by the bear, as it were. Obviously, if that wasn't a consideration, he should have just had Gandhi give me food. Neither Gandhi nor I need food, so it's just trading something that one doesn't need to give to the other person who also doesn't need it, and that would have been the least impactful thing. In any case, for his actual turn, he builds the fast food chains to get a bump in culture, getting 19 points. He then grabs the communism, researches it for a ton of civil actions and military actions, and even an extra rock. The happy face is okay. He does have these bread and circuses he researched and never built, so he can still fix his happy faces. He raises population, plays the reserves, and then he makes one of these arenas to fix his happy faces. Now, you know what I'm going to say about that. He researched communism. Communism is a technology. If you research another technology, you get a Nobel Prize for 4 points. He should have researched tanks here and gotten 4 points. I do think this was a systemic error on Matil's part. He was basically playing as if the Nobel Prize didn't exist. But I think he should have been collecting that 4 extra culture per turn, and in general, making more of a focus on getting culture with Einstein. That would have been a good way to stem the bleeding from the culture loss, and he could have theoretically done that and tried to build up a big army at the same time. But this is what he goes for, so we pass the turn. Gandhi, of course, is thrilled to see Marlene here. That's a big deal for him, because now he can make a pretty cool move on his turn. Oh, first of all, okay, hang on a second, I gotta pause. He offers international tourism to Matil. This ends up being very important in this game. He offers this pact. Each civilization gets an extra culture for every completed wonder by the other civilization. Now, let's take a look at who's getting what from this. Matil has 3 wonders, so Gandhi stands to gain 3 culture per turn. Gandhi himself has only 1, so Matil stands to gain only 1 culture per turn, and Gandhi being 3rd will get the culture an extra time compared to Matil. So it's a terrible, terrible pact. He offers it to Matil anyway. Keep in mind, this is an asynchronous game, so half the day goes by waiting for Matil to pick up his phone and respond to the offer and be like, what the hell is this? And say no. And Gandhi just went for that. So this does reveal perhaps he doesn't have any events he wants to play. Of course, it might be that even if he has good events, he doesn't want to play them because he's behind on strength and worried about these events. But we'll make a note of that. He offers that pact to Matil, and Matil obviously declines. Okay, now he grabs Marlene, turns a temple into an opera using Bach. He loses 2 happy faces doing that, but it's fine because Marlene's coming, so don't miss this move. This is an important move to have in your arsenal. You can actually do this kind of a switch from a happy face solution to an opera, and then play Marlene, and then she becomes your happy face solution. So now he's getting 11 culture per turn. He raises population, builds another theater, so he's going full bore with it. And now, if he has the entrenchments, he can actually get an additional 6 strength with Marlene, because she's basically giving him an extra shadow rocket and putting that tactic card online. And he does have it. So he's actually hanging on in there in strength. Really impressive for having only 4 actions and no science. But he's getting the culture. He's hanging on in there. It's a little bit deceptive because Einstein does give 3 culture per technology, and Mathilde should be getting Nobel Prizes, so it's like an extra 4 culture per turn, which really eats into this gap. Plus, he's already in the lead with the fast food chains. But still, Gandhi is in the running. I would say maybe not to win it, but definitely to get second place. All right, so now we're going to do a little guide on how to declare a war. Because I got to declare a war. The question is, who do I declare war against? And if you are an experienced player, I beg your pardon, is probably going to be a little bit dull and everything will be really common sense. But if you are, a newer player, maybe like below 1400 or below 13 or 1200 strength, I hope that this will be helpful. So how do you decide who to declare war against and whether you should declare war at all? I think there's like a few stages of consideration that you need to go through. The first and the easiest stage is how much strength can I get? And in my case, and that's usually the easiest thing to do. In my case, it's pretty simple. I do patriotism, I do the reserves. Let me see if I can bring this up without revealing that I declare the war. If I can see what the cards are in the row. 1 second. Okay, I don't think I can actually show these cards without the game revealing who I declared war against. I will just say that these cards were not relevant. So, my strength, I make 2 workers. I play patriotism or reserves, I get 10 rocks. I make a cannon, I make a horse. That's 6 flat strength plus 5 is 11. I go up to 50 strength. As we're going to see, it is relevant to get these satellites and go up to 53 strength. That does end up mattering. So my strength is 53. Okay. Who do I declare war against? Well, now we go to the second stage, which is to look at your opponents and see how much strength they could get if they tried to get as much strength as possible. The shadow army, as it were. So if you look at Mathilde, he's got 11 rocks. He's got no rocks that help with making military units. And this is where we kind of dip into the third stage a little bit, which is to consider hidden information. So he might, of course, have the mechanized army. If he does, then he could research tanks, and he's 1 rock short of being able to make a tank and a cannon. That would cost 12 rocks. What he could do is he could upgrade a tank for 4 rocks. That would give him 4 strength, going from 2 strength to... Sorry, that would give him 3 strength, going from 2 strength to 5. It would cost 4 rocks, so that would be 3. Make another cannon. That's another 3, so that's 6, plus another tank. Plus, now he would have an outdated mechanized army, which is the same as a mobile artillery, and he would have an up-to-date mechanized army, which would be 10. So 1-5 would turn into a 10. He'd get 6 flat strength. That is 16 strength. He'd go up to 47. But also, there is the possibility that he or Gandhi has the military alliance. Don't forget about this card, because if one of them is holding that in their hand, then they'll offer it to the other. So if Mathilde has it, he'll offer it to Gandhi, but if Gandhi has it, Gandhi will offer it to Mathilde to help Mathilde win the war. So that's why the satellites are important. If Mathilde does have the mechanized army and gets 16 strength, he goes up to 47, plus the artillery, or plus what's her face? What the thing is called? The military alliance. There we go. Words fail him. The military alliance, he's actually going to go up to 50. And then if a military theory shows up, he can actually go up to 55. So he can get up there if the right cards appear. However, if he does have the military theory, he can't do that and tanks. So then he would get 5 from that and another 10 from just making a cannon and a horse. 5 plus 10 is 15, so it's actually a little bit better for him to do the tank option if he has the mechanized army. So 16 plus 3, 19, that's the most he can do. He's at 50. And so if I don't get the satellites, I'm just at 50 and the war is a tie. And if I overlook something, then we're in more trouble. So the satellites are important. I got to get up to 53. So a bit of a small war, but he'd have to get pretty lucky. He'd have to get like the military theory. He'd have to have the military alliance, or he'd have to have the military theory, or he'd not have the military theory and have the mechanized army. But still, even if he has any of those things, I can beat him. Gandhi, who has less strength, is actually in an interesting spot here because it may look like, okay, well, he's the obvious target. He has less strength, and he can't do the stuff that Matil was talking about. All he can do is make one more rocket and like a warrior, and that doesn't give him any extra tactics. So it seems like Gandhi is the, other thing that you'd want to, or Gandhi's a player that you want to declare war against. However, the next stage to consider is the passage of time and the event deck. I think I knew one of these cards, but I don't believe I knew, but I did not know the other one. So you have to ask yourself, what events could show up that would actually change what a person is able to do on their turn? And there's a finite number of cards that can make a difference. I mean, obviously a number of them can make a difference in like edge cases, but there's a finite number that can like obviously make a difference. One is Cold War, giving your opponent some extra science. That is already gone. One is Economic Progress, giving your opponent some surprise rocks. That is gone. Another one is Freedom of Movement. This lets the person move something from an urban building to a military card, which can be really significant as we have seen, but that's in my hand. We have the Arms Industry. That's the main one. Because this, if you look at the situation here, Gandhi would get 4 rocks, which would give him 14 total, which is enough to make 2 rockets. And 2 rockets would actually give him an additional outdated version of this positional army tactic. So he would get 10 flat strength for the 2 rockets, plus an additional 6. He'd also get 16. And there is still the possibility of a military alliance. Now, it's not likely that one of these 2 players gives the other a military alliance and the other one flips an event, wins the coin flip, and it's an Arms Industry, which I don't even know if it's in the deck. It might very well not be. But if that happens, then he could actually get a lot of strength. What is it, like, 5, 10, 16? 16 plus 3 is 19. And then, yeah, he can get really high up there. So I still beat him, but it is narrow. And for that reason, I decided to actually go after Matil. I thought Matil had the better chance of winning anyway. I could be pretty sure that I would beat him in the war unless I really overlooked something crazy. And he would have to get lucky in any case in order to be able to beat me in the war. So I chose Matil because they could both land on similar strengths. Gandhi had a scarier upside, and Matil's turn was up sooner, so it was less likely that, weird crap could happen. The events that mattered for Gandhi don't matter for Matil because Matil gets nothing from Arms Industry. Gandhi's rockets beat us both, my cavalry beats his knights, and he doesn't have an infantry tactic. And so for that reason, I chose him. I also want to mention there are a couple of colonies that can matter. Wealthy territory to give someone some surprise rocks, and autonomous territory to give someone some surprise rocks, but both of them have passed already. So this is a pretty good situation for me to be declaring war, because almost all of the cards that could possibly swing the war were accounted for, but this one could have been a critical one for Gandhi. So I declare the war against Matil, and I go about it. We get the satellites, research satellites. I raise 2 workers. I make an army playing reserves first, and then I even have 3 actions left over. I could even push it more. I could play patriotism, blow up a lab, make another sword or something like that, but I decided not to go for it. I was pretty confident that Matil could not get ahead of me here. So I take more reserves because I will need more rocks, since rocks are kind of my low thing, and I grab an urban growth. It was worth considering taking a revolutionary idea, but I figured at this point I did not need airplanes and military theory. I just needed one of them, and I already could get that one. Maybe revolutionary idea just to be safe would have been fine. The urban growth, as we'll see, doesn't end up being that big of a deal either. What exactly am I doing with this urban growth? Kind of nothing. So I might have made a little misplay doing that. I think it's also possible I messed up by playing reserves instead of patriotism. Patriotism would have let me get an extra card draw this turn and try to get an event to play, because I currently don't have any impacts. I was thinking, well, maybe I'll need it in a future turn, and so since I can do this turn without it, I might as well. But the thing is, what am I going to do on a future turn? On a future turn, it'd be the exact same thing, declaring war. So I might as well have used it now to get the card now and get the information earlier. All right, so Matil is up. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but in general, all else being equal, it's good to declare war on the person who's coming up earlier because like less stuff can happen. You know, if Gandhi has the pact, he could still offer it before the war is resolved, but only one event will get flipped in time to matter for Matil. So I kind of hold my breath a little bit. He plays an event. It's Ravages of Time, which doesn't make any difference to anything. I mean, so Matil loses a happy face. That doesn't really matter. And he gets an extra culture because one of Stonehenge's turns into 2. Romanodes is already making 2 culture for Gandhi, so it keeps doing that if he just loses a blue and yellow token. And I lose a strength, but that will not be until after the war is resolved. So I was the one who actually put that event in, but I knew, because of how the mechanics work, that even if it does get flipped, it will be after the war is resolved that it gets flipped, so I'm not going to lose my strength until after the accounting for the war happens. Now, I got to give Matil some credit here. I did not see this move. I thought he was going to just like take airplanes, research it, make an airplane for 10, and call it a day. Or if he had the mechanized army, he would do the tank thing I mentioned for 3, 6, 11, and just, you know, be good with that. But he found something that I did not anticipate at all. What he does is he blows up a temple and makes a knight, makes a cannon. So that part makes sense. This is 10 strength, fine. But from here, he takes pro sports, researches it, upgrades the bread and circus into a pro sport, and then he blows up the theater, builds it into an arena from age A, and then upgrades it for free with a vision upgrade into pro sports, which is more strength than I was thinking that he had. And if he'd had the military alliance, or if Gandhi had, he could have actually gone up to 51 and made it really close. I still would have been happy to steal 7 culture from him. I think it's still worth it. But I gotta admit, I did not see this possibility coming with the professional sports being popped like that. Now, you know what I'm gonna say. For his last action, he should have researched the damn tanks and gotten the Nobel Prize. But he doesn't. He takes the revolutionary idea so he can like get a bigger thing next turn. But, you know, we're already kind of running out of time here. He needed to be taking these Nobel Prizes while he could. All right, so he minimizes the damage very astutely. Gandhi's up. He offers international tourism to Matil a second time. Now this, my friends, this is one of the most incredible things I have ever seen. This is not just the move of the game. This is the move of the tournament. I am blessed that I was in this group, in this stage with these players, that I got to witness this first hand, because nothing else that could possibly happen in any of the other groups and any of the other players in this tournament could be as majestic as the second turn in a row offer of the international tourism. This is not a move. By doing this, Gandhi is making a statement, and that statement is, you, sir, are a bitch. You are going to open your phone and you're going to have to look at this offer and you're going to have to reject it a second time, and the game is going to be delayed for like half a day or a full day because of it, and I'm going to do it. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're going to go on there and you're going to have to respond to this, you loser. Ultimate alpha move. I don't think I've ever seen a more Giga Chad statement in my entire life. So slow clap to Gandhi. Well done, sir, and thank you for blessing my existence with this majesty. Okay, so after that is taken care of, he raises population, makes another rocket, grabs democracy, and endowment for the arts. I think we need to analyze his moves too much, though I do think it's worth noting that it's a little bit late for this ship. He's got enough culture already. I think reserves and patriotism, just to, you know, ward off future wars, would have made more sense, but whatever. He makes an upgrade here, so he could potentially, given enough time, actually get 2 of these full armies, and then he passes the turn. So now, I think if Gandhi had gone like for reserves and patriotism instead of endowment and democracy, I would have had to really think about this. But as it is, I decide, even if it is the armed industry now, because he didn't build up his strength now, it's time to declare war on Gandhi. So I steal the 10 strength from Matil, I crumble my Acropolis, it's time to declare war on my other opponent, so I'm being a real bully this game. And now I just take the air forces, I research them, I play the patriotism, I play the reserves, I have the crucial 14 rocks, this allows me to make 2 airplanes, each of which is worth 10 strength. I just blow up my little battery here. I like to call it my lab battery or my alchemy battery, where, you use these for science throughout the game. Then when they're not making a relevant amount of science anymore, you just pop them off for workers. And there we go. We're up to 72 strength. So Gandhi can put up a pretty good showing, but because he didn't build his strength last time or take any yellow cards that help with his military strength, he's not really able to put up a good fight here. I could have taken military theory. It would have actually been pretty similar. Making 2 of these and getting the military theory is really similar to doing the airplanes. That may have even been the better choice because I would have gotten to draw extra cards doing it that way. But I decided to go for maximum strength, and with my last action I take the reserves, of course, so I can build more stuff in the future. I actually still could, thanks to this engineering genius and this reserves and a Louvre token, get the United Nations wonder. Though it's not likely to survive to my turn, it is not impossible for me to end up getting it. Mainly what I need is for the next 3 cards not to include it. So it's a coin flip, but if it doesn't show up in the next 3 cards, Matil can't take it because it's not there. Gandhi can't take it because he has no actions, and then I get it on my turn. With this move, it's worth noting that because I took reserves, which came out of the go-away slot, instead of taking the patriotism, or any of these other cards for that matter, it's not guaranteed that Age 4 will trigger on Gandhi's turn. Matil could have a reasonably and actually kind of surprisingly productive turn, not taking any cards from here, but I calculated that it just didn't seem like it was worth it for him to do that. It didn't seem like it would help him that much to, not take any cards, sacrifice a little bit of value, and then hope that Gandhi would resign to guarantee himself second place. Because at that point, he's not going to, catch up to me even if Gandhi does resign, so it didn't really seem like it would be worth it for him to do that. And indeed, that is the case. He did not, try to, avoid anything. In particular, on Gandhi's turn, or on Matil's turn, we'll see that the United Nations does show up, so he is able to take this, and once he does, Gandhi will have Age 4 trigger on his turn. Now, that's what I was thinking, but it actually took a different turn here. Matil takes the military theory, researches it. He then plays revolutionary idea, takes engineering, takes another revolutionary idea, takes patriotism, and then he finally researches tanks. Just kidding, he takes air forces and raises the population. I was goggled. This is the hardest I have ever seen anybody work to not get a Nobel Prize. I wonder if he just honestly forgot about it. It may have just been a brain blip, or maybe Matil is just not experienced with Nobel or something. But you gotta get the Nobel Prizes. You gotta do it, man. So if he does it here, he goes down to 2 science. 2 + 5 is 7, which means that he's not going to be able to get a Nobel Prize next turn. So you could say, well, he's just getting a Nobel Prize next turn instead of this turn, and that's fair. But it also does show that, this is why getting more science production would have been helpful throughout the age, because if he had been able to do that, then he may have been able to, get more Nobels throughout the game. Also, he's done 4 turns in a row or something where he just researched 1 technology per turn. If he had condensed them, he could have snuck in a couple of extra Nobel Prizes. In any case, he doesn't take United Nations, so he doesn't get the Nobel Prize or the United Nations, which I was a little bit surprised by. I think in his shoes, I might have just spent 9 actions taking reserves in United Nations just to, be able to build more in my last turn, but he doesn't decide to do that, so I was very happy to see it. The turn passes, Age 4 starts, Gandhi is no longer allowed to resign. He plays an event, and I did not put this in here. Somebody put Impact of Competition in here. It may have been Matil, on the grounds of, well, I'm going to get ahead of Gandhi on it, so let's do that. That's very possible. Matil is the one who got those arenas, so maybe he just decided to do this to get a further ahead in the race for second, but I was, of course, very glad that this completely cemented my chances of getting first. So Gandhi raises population, plays revolutionary idea and democracy for some extra culture. He raises population again. He builds a rocket, and then he upgrades the warrior. He now does have 2 complete positional armies thanks to Marlene, but it is still not enough. 54 strength is a really high amount of strength, and in some games that'll win you wars. But in this case, because I was able to push so hard for the military and just shovel my workers into an H2 tactic, it's just not enough to keep up. Now, instead of getting democracy, he could have taken military theory, but the thing you have to understand is that that would have taken a lot of actions. It only looks like he has a lot of actions, excuse me, because he researched democracy. If he takes military theory for 2 actions, plays the revolutionary idea so he can research it, and then researches it, he would only have 1 civil action left. And, he needed the, he needed to raise his population twice in order to make the moves that he made. So I think that he actually did make the right call with democracy, even though it looks like military theory would have saved him more culture. 5 culture less being stolen versus the 3 from democracy. On the other hand, I guess democracy counts twice, so that's 6. Works out better anyways. All right, he takes the reserves. No surprise there. He could have actually hate drafted the United Nations from me. He wouldn't have been able to build it, but he could have stolen it. On the other hand, he figured it doesn't matter. I'm losing to Boristina anyway, and Matil can't build it, so there's no point in doing that kind of a hate draft. He just takes the reserves to benefit himself, and the multimedia, which he can't research, but, it's just taking something off that maybe Matil could have researched, and he passes the turn. So I steal a pretty hefty 23 culture from Gandhi, and now I make a little, I don't want to call it a mistake, because I did it knowingly, but I do make a purposeful suboptimal move. I don't plunder. I don't have anything to do here. Peace treaty is dumb. It gives me 1 point against one opponent, but I could have and should have plundered, and I should have plundered Matil. The odds of it going through are pretty high with 2 defense cards. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He has, oh no, it's not as high as I think. Hold up. Yes. With 2 defense cards and 7 other cards, he's at 19, which is exactly enough to defend. Now, there weren't that many defense cards left. I don't think, this replay system doesn't show you what has been accounted for and what hasn't. So it was likely to go through, but maybe not as likely as I thought. I thought he needed 3 defense cards. He only needed 2 out of this giant pile. Regardless, I should have tried it. I should have absolutely tried it. If nothing else, if he only had 2, he would have had to throw his whole hand away to block the aggression. And then maybe Gandhi could have done an aggression on him when he had no military actions left. Maybe it would have thrown away a beneficial event for him. I should have tried because he is ahead in the standings to make him lose instead of getting second. But I just, it's these asynchronous games. I just wanted the instant gratification of making my turn right away, so I just didn't do it. I was like, you know what, let's just let them decide amongst themselves instead of trying to influence it, which is completely a mistake. You should not do these noble things like, oh, I should not, be mean. Like, that's not good game theory, folks. You should always try to make the move within the rules of the game that maximizes your odds of winning the game, and here there is the current game and also the metagame of winning the group, and yes, I should have done that. But I was lazy and didn't, so I just took the United Nations, got my reserves, used a Louvre token, and with the Engineering Genius now, I built this for just 16 raw points. And then with my last action, there was nothing relevant to do, so I raised a worker, although it does lose me a culture from Mandela, because now this happy face isn't extra, and if the impact of population isn't in there, which I have no idea how, there's no reason I would think that it must be or anything, I don't actually get the point back. I get 2 points with impact of population, losing 1, so it's 1 net point, but I could have also gotten a net point by blowing up a sword. Impact of competition has already passed. The sword does literally nothing. And then I could have urban growthed into a temple and gotten a point that way. That just would have been objectively the superior play. So some sloppy jalopy stuff for me here. By the way, I would have also gotten an extra culture from not having to spend a Louvre token if I had done a plunder. So yeah, there's some extra culture that could have been gleaned here. But we go over to Matil. He plays an event. We get impact of technology, which I managed to do surprisingly well at, because he did hold back some of these texts. I don't know who put this in. If it was Gandhi who put it in, it might have surprised him. But then again, if it was Gandhi, why would Gandhi put that in? So Matil, if he put it in, he should have researched technology earlier to get some more points. In any case, he develops engineering. He plays revolutionary idea, makes his theater back. He finally gets the first, and I believe only, Nobel Prize of the game from anybody, blows up a mine, plays the patriotism, makes an airplane, grabs rockets, grabs growth, and then he just passes the turn. So Gandhi's up. He makes a 4th theater and puts his culture up to an impressive 21. He gets another 6 points from the endowment, gets some food, makes a worker. I do think that's actually a mistake, because if impact of food is in here, now he doesn't get the 4-point bonus for food production exceeding consumption. And spoiler alert, impact of population is not in there, so he was just gambling that impact of population would be in there, but it's a gamble that maybe you get 2 points in exchange for maybe you lose 4. So just mathematically, it's not a good gamble, but it doesn't end up mattering here. And we go over into the final scoring. So at this point, the only thing that we're looking at is, will Gandhi catch up to Matil? He's only 3 points behind in the final scoring, which is honestly impressive. Gandhi, I think, is really strong in H3 gameplay. He almost took that game for me that I thought I had sewn up when it was him, me, and Alexander. He played, I think, H3 really well, and I do think Matil made some mistakes in H3. I've also seen, of course, Matil play H3 really beautifully, so, everyone's kind of a mixed bag with how strong they are at playing different ages. But I think Gandhi did an amazing job, considering especially that he did lose like 23 culture to me in a war. He's right there. He could catch up to Mattil, and I could have influenced that by trying to plunder Mattil, though we'll never know, of course, if Mattil had the defense cards. So the first two events are a wash. Gandhi is still 3 points behind. The next event is the impact of strength, which I did not put in. I didn't put any events in. This is all my opponent's impacts. It was causing me some stress during the age. Like, what are these impacts? If I'm not far enough in the lead, I could potentially, lose a whole lot. Well, it turns out my opponents didn't get, like, the really critical ones, like impact of science, for example, would have been really, really huge. But Mattil probably put this in to get the 7 points against Gandhi. And then we have the impact of wonders, which actually helps me, because I had the most wonders built. And the final event here is the impact of variety. And Mattil really crushes on that one. Gandhi falls further behind. So it ends up being a pretty big gap. I doubt a plunder would have influenced this. But that is, my friends, the end of the game. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and or subscribe. And it's been like 2 hours or something, so you're welcome to go. Please enjoy the rest of your day. But if you want to stick around, we can take a look at the standings to see what's happening in the current stage of the tournament. So all the 3-player games have now finished, including the game that my opponents played amongst themselves. And what happened in that game was, let's say, the best, but also the least interesting. The reason I say this is that the outcome of the game between my opponents was exactly the perfect outcome for me. What happened in that game is that Gandhi won, Mattil got second, and Alexander tragically pulled a Boris, which is exactly what I did in stage 1 of this tournament, where he got a first and a second in the 4-player games and lost, came in last in all three 3-player games. And this was seemingly a pretty crushing victory here for Gandhi, and a sad, sad loss for Alexander. I might actually look at this game to see what happens. But the reason that that's the best outcome for me is that it causes this split where Mattil has 9, Alexander has 9, the 9 points he had going into the 3-player games, and Gandhi's up to 8. I, having won a 4-player game and all the 3-player games, beat everybody on tie breaks. So in order for anyone to have had a shot of beating me in this stage, they would have needed to be within 11 points of me. Because if they're 12 points behind, even if they win all 3 2-player games and get 12 points, and I lose all 3 and I get nothing, they go up to me, they catch up to me, we are tied, and I win the tie break. But if someone is within 11 points of me, then they could win all 3 2-player games. I would lose all 3 2-player games, let's say, and they get 12 points, I get 0, they are 1 point ahead of me, and they win the group instead. The only way that we could have a situation where nobody is within 11 points of me is for exactly the outcome that we just saw, that Gandhi got 5, Mattil got 2, and Alexander got 0 from their 3-player game, because now if any of them wins all 3 of their 2-player games, they're going to have less than 22 points. They'll have 21 if they're Mattil or Alexander, or 20 if they're Gandhi. So I could lose all 3 2-player games, and I still win. So holy crap, I'm actually going to stage 4. If Alexander had won, then he would have been at 14, and so he could have won all 3 2-player games and beaten me if I lost all 3 2-player games. The most interesting outcome would have been if Mattil won and Alexander came in second. If Mattil had won instead of getting second, he would have been at 12, which is within 10 points. And Alexander, if he had gotten second instead of last, would have been at 11, which is within 12 points as well. So Mattil would have been 10 points behind me, and Alexander would have been 11. So if either one of them won all 3 of their games, and I lost all 3 of mine, they would have won the group. But instead, the perfect thing happened. I mean, I'm hoping I don't lose all 3 2-player games because I had a strong showing in the other counts. I just needed to win 1 game to guarantee that I move ahead in the tournament. But because of this, it's actually already done. So I'm really, really excited. I'm going to go celebrate. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and or subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.